And with that, we are live. This is awesome. Welcome back, Phil. Welcome back, Mike. And for all of us joining us right now, let me just go ahead and kill the music real quick. Enough lo-fi for today. Welcome to the Community Office Hours Nomad 1.6 edition. I am super excited to have both of you here. And I know we have a lot of viewers that join us every single time we do Nomad Office Hours. Thank you for coming back. But for the ones that don't know you, Phil, who are you? What do you do? And why is it the single most handsome interface that I've ever seen?
Hey, yeah, I'm a UI engineer here on the Nomad team. I'm based out of Toronto, and what I do is I make the web UI. So if you ever load up the /UI interface, ever try to run jobs through the UI, I've been part of building that out for a little over a year now.
Very nice, very nice. Mike, how do you make sure that these interfaces look so delicious?
Talking to our users, that's how. But hey, everybody, I'm Mike Nomich. I'm the product manager for Nomad. Been here around 2 years. Well, HashiCorp for 4 years, but I'm Nomad.
I was going to say, you've been around.
Yeah, I used to work on Terraform Cloud. Now I'm Team Nomad all the way.
I love it. Talking to our users is definitely a good topic. We've talked a lot to our users. We're always looking for more user feedback. But before we dive into all of that, if you've been here before, this is going to sound like a broken record. If you haven't been here before, our community office hours are public space. So please be welcoming, inclusive, and friendly, and patient. Not everyone here is a first language speaker. English language speaker. Be considerate, be respectful, and of course professional. If you see something in the chat, let us know, report it to one of the moderators, we'll take care of it. With that being said, if you have questions, definitely drop them in the chat. And let us know where you're hailing from. We see a couple of folks, Shantanu, of course, always, Stefan, hello. And as Jasmine said in the background, welcome all. All right, so let's talk about 1.6. It's been out for 2 weeks, but this has been a long time coming, and there's so much good stuff in there. Phil, favorite feature that you did not work on in 1.6?
I actually like node pools a lot. If you haven't had the chance to see much about it, I think you'll find out more soon. But node pools have really made it easy to think about how your clients or nodes, right, organize. I have always thought about them as like a big blob of all the machines I'm running my jobs on. And I'll sometimes think of them as like, well, some machines are appropriate based on my metadata and some are not. But now you can be a lot more declaratively specific about how to set those up.
Beautiful. Mike, same question for you. What's your favorite feature?
I like them all. It's hard to pick a favorite. I'm going to point to the job restart command to restart all the allocations in a job, and also pass a -reschedule flag to that to reschedule all the allocations in a job, which I like. It's like a smaller thing. It's not as big as the others, but I feel like that'll be a big hit with a lot of operators out there.
Oh, 100%. And let me quickly highlight a few people that are joining us. If you're joining us on LinkedIn or YouTube, please let us know where you're from. It's exciting to see what our reach is. And of course, Eduardo, I could not agree more with you. These are all really cool features. But today, I want to talk about the UI. So I think, Phil, you're up first. You've got some demos for us.
Yeah, I'll be doing things live. So hopefully, I guess the nice thing about showing orchestrator that recovers well is that if I screw up, it will hopefully recover well. So I'm going to try not to screw it up anyway, but if I do, that's my fallback. Okay, let's share my screen. And share. You should now see my browser looking at the Nomad jobs index. Cool. So I've got a couple of jobs running. What I'm about to do is run a few more jobs and show you what it looks like historically to have run a job and do something like monitor it. Maybe you have something like an operations center with your organization where you have a handful of jobs up on individual screens and you're just trying to watch to see how's it going over time. Maybe you're hitting like a known cron rollover or something, and you know that something's about to happen. And you gather your people in the room, you know, watch a screen, and you say, has that thing happened successfully? Okay, well, there's a million ways to historically have done that. And the Nomad UI has historically not been the best way to do it. I'll show you for a second why. I'm going to click into this job called fails every 10. And as you might guess, it fails pretty often. And historically, what you would have seen is a page that looks like this. You would see a bunch of allocations in a starting, a queued, or complete, or failed state, and hopefully some larger number that's in a running state. What I really want to show off today is that we've made some big improvements to this page. Instead of being on historical mode, the default now is current mode. When you think about jobs running on Nomad, I think that the abstraction a lot of people that prefer to use is this concept of allocations, right? I have this job that I've said, you know, run 40 of, and I in fact see up to 40 dots on my screen. Each one of these is a healthy and running allocation. If I click into this, it'd be the same thing as if I click into one of these. It'll take me right to the allocation page where I can see memory and CPU usage and any other tasks that are taking place. But at that top level, it's important for me to be able to see something like this because I can watch what's happening in real time. I'm going to show off a couple of features at once here just to try and show why this is relevant, but try to follow along with me here. My deployments are covered. The version that I'm running is covered. The replaced allocations has been made into like a more explicit little screen. In this case, my job definition is designed to fail. This is a job that is mimicking something kind of flaky. So about, I think 10% of the time, one of these allocations will fail to start. I think you'll see my roll dice has a view logs button you can see here. And I should see every now and then I'll see that it rolled badly. If I roll badly, it means this job will fail or this allocation will fail. And stay a while and listen means that the allocation is running successfully. What does this mean in practical terms? This means that I've had about 10% of my allocations just not work out. I have a restart policy on this. I'll show you the definition now. A restart policy on this that says that these can come back up to one time. And then a reschedule policy as well that says that if they don't restart well, they can try and be replaced elsewhere. You can see with these new links, I can just click into them and see the 8 allocations that have been placed somewhere else. If I were to click into one of these, you can see in my reschedule events, this allocation did fail. It was replaced. This is the new one. Click right into that. Anyway, it gives you kind of like a mental model of how all things fit together via the UI. Okay, let's do something maybe a little bit more interesting in this job. I sort of hinted at this a second ago, but in my definition here, you probably saw something a little bit unusual. You might be used to seeing this. This is the full spec of the job written in JSON, but this is not actually how most people, thank you, Daniel. This is how most people actually, not how most people actually edit or modify jobs. What they do is they go into an HCL style job spec. You're able to edit this directly through the UI. And the important thing I really want to hammer home here is that these are maintained with your job. You modify your job, you submit your job, as long as you're editing it in HCL, you're going to see those changes continue. So I'll make a couple changes here. I'm going to say that this should have a count of 80 instead of 40. And I'm going to change my failure rate from 15% of the time. Let's just change it up to 20% of the time. Let's plan it. It'll show me what I've done. And we're going to see a couple things happening. Okay, this is a canary job. It is checking canary health right now. You can see some status as this is taking place. I see 10 of these. They have a little orange flag on the bottom left corner indicating they're canaries. 9 have succeeded and passed their checks, and 1 currently has a thing saying health unknown. That means that that canary is running, but its checks maybe have not passed, and it's restarting itself. You can see a restart link. If I were to click on this to get through it. The restart was successful. My checks have passed, and I have my notification at the top has changed. Instead of saying canary status being checked, it now says deployment requires promotion. You can see canary equals 10 here in my update parameters. If I were to go in here and click on promote canary, you're going to see this start to fill out the rest of the way. If I click on fail deployment, it's going to roll me back to my previous version. Those 40 are still running. Let's move this forward. Watch exactly what happens when I hit promote canary, remembering that I have a max parallel of 10 here. So this will happen kind of gradually over the next 80. Let's click promote. Okay, so a bunch at a time are starting to kind of scaffold up. You'll see a little button here that says V1. More of them are being restarted because, again, now up to 20% of these are going to fail. We see one is red temporarily. It says failed. You're going to see something happen in a second. It's going to get zoomed out of the screen. It's going to come back green again. That means it got rescheduled. So
real quick, Phil, before we continue and show off this deliciousness, can you bump up the screen size a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Thanks.
It's worth seeing these animations
a big
at
a monitor going
much
on.
Bigger size.
Up top, you see previous allocations at V0. We have 24 of them running. This number will tick down. The number of complete is going to become more and more light green, less and less dark green. And then as these tick up and pass their health checks, they'll keep going. One thing worth kind of calling attention to here is we have two different statuses based on like things are going well. One of those things going well might be your allocation is running, but another thing might be that allocation has passed health checks. You might have health checks really explicitly defined. You might have them just defined as services up. You can define these anyway, and the UI will correctly take a look at them and say, oh yeah, it is or is not working as you might expect. This is pretty responsive, so I can bump my screen size up or change my browser size down, and you'll see the plus 60, plus 59, plus 70, depending on my screen resolution. So it works on your smaller monitors and your bigger ones. And we successfully managed to take this 20% failure rate job and still get it all the way up to 80 out of 80 allocations running. I took the time to walk us through this because I really want to show the difference between the current rate, which shows a couple of not so scary rescheduled and restarted links, and the historical way of showing this, which is a big blob of red, even though nothing is actually that bad here, right? We have 11 failed in the historical view. We have everything green in the current view. That's because you asked for 80 allocations and you have 80 running healthy allocations. We kind of made the design decision when we first started working on this to say, yeah, you have the thing that you want. They're healthy, they're running, everything seems to be going well. Don't try to trouble the end user operator by saying, well, some of them failed during deployment, or some of them failed, but they were replaced. That information is still here. It's just maybe not so scary looking. A few other things to call your attention to here. Allocation history has kind of been ticking by as I deployed this. You can use this for just about anything. You can look up an allocation ID specifically, or you can just look up a word like restart. And you'll see all the allocations that actually did restart, see information about them. If I happen to have a placement failure or something, you would see that there as well. From here, you can click into any of the allocations, just like you might have done otherwise. A little bit more present during the deployment itself, but still pretty easy to get to after deployment. Okay, I'm going to run a few more jobs real quick. I'm just going to fire them off here. Let's run that one and this one. That sounds right. Okay. If I go back to my jobs page, I'll type in GJ. We'll see a couple new jobs here. One called fails after deploy, which does exactly what you think it might do. Another one called fake buy. Let's take a look at fails after deploy. In the intervening moments when I ran that to where it is now, it is fully failed. So let's start that job again. Well, we might need to purge it actually, and start that again. Oops. Here we go. Fails after deploy. Oh, this is in failed state, so maybe I can't get it running. That's okay. We'll show you with the other one. Fake buy. This is a fun one. This is in a deploying status. But you'll see a couple of things going on here. One of the 21 allocations that I wanted to see here, I have a count of 21 on this, has a requirement for me to be running Consul, and I happen to have shut down Consul. I'm going to get a big loud error at the top that'll tell me my placement failure. You'll see these kinds of errors for all sorts of things. You'll see them tell you that the image that you try to download is invalid. You'll see things that say that the driver has filtered something out, or a version has filtered something out. We'll try to give you as much information as we can. But the bigger point is you'll see this front and center now. It's going to be a big notification at the top of your page that says, this is why things haven't completed deploying, or if the version gets out of date after deployment is done, this is why this thing is no longer running as you would expect. You can still take a look at everything else having to do with this job. Another thing to call your attention to is these allocations are running, but they're not healthy. I'll click into one of the allocations. I'll scroll down to services at the bottom, for example, task fake pi. And if you haven't seen this before, it has a bunch of different health checks, and they're all failing across the board. So technically, this is running. If I were to click onto this host address, I would see my little web server there. But the health checks for it are either getting a 4 or 4 or something else. So a little way of saying, yeah, things are running, they're good, but there's got a big X on it. This means that it's not passing the health checks that you asked in the past. Okay, last thing I kind of want to show off here before we maybe start taking questions and things like that is a new page that's upcoming. Everything I've shown you so far, it's now live. If you download the latest Nomad at 1.6 or 1.61, you'll see all the things that are shown off and then some. One of the things that's brand new and upcoming is this variables page. If you haven't played around with Nomad variables before, they're pretty great. We have had an interface in the UI for a little while. It looks like this. And there are some special keywords for it. If I go to click create variable, you'll see something at the top that says prefix your path with, and we give you some instructions to make automatic finding of variables by tasks and jobs based on their names. This has been pretty reasonable. You've been able to do things like click into a job like FakePy and see, oh, there's a variables link right here. I can click to it. It'll take me right to the variable for that job. But we've done one better. Go to jobs and FakePy. There's now an entire variables page. So if you're starting your job through the UI, maybe you're using the new HCL in the UI to be able to run and update jobs, right? You can continue to use the UI right from the jobs page to create more variables for it. And it's going to give you a bunch of suggestions that are appropriate as well. For example, I have a group called FakePy, my FakePy job, and I have a task in my group called another server. If I click on this, I can just add a key with a value and hit save variables, and this will automatically be created. If I go back to that variables page, we'll now see that exists here. So it's a really quick and easy way of finding out what is my task, what does my job automatically have access to. We do the sorting for you. You might have a lot of jobs and a lot of variables, and they might be kind of tricky for you to awk and set out. This is an easier way of seeing what has access to what. Okay, let's see. That's jobs. That's the UI. I think that's everything I wanted to show right now. I think I'll turn it back over to you, Kareem.
Beautiful. Beautiful demo. Great stuff. Like Mike said, silent applause because we don't want to blow everyone's eardrums. Meanwhile, we've got a couple of questions. Let me grab the first one. There we go. So Shantanu asks, remarks upon the possibility that there's 3 distinct visual styles. One for the UI label all the way at the top, which if you've not used that before, it is one of the coolest, smallest features that the Nomad UI has. I absolutely love it. It has definitely saved me from blowing up the wrong cluster. Then of course, generally squared and the slightly rounded for the new allocations GUI. Any thoughts on this, Phil?
Yeah, it was more of an engineering focused update a few months ago, but HashiCorp now has this open source component library. We call it Helios. Helios has some predefined styles for things, and as HashiCorp brings more and more of its products together in ensembles, like our cloud products and offerings, they wanted to have a more consistent look. Okay, well, Nomad predates not only this component library, but also a lot of these web offerings, or cloud offerings, I should say. As we bring Nomad's UI up to speed with some of the other cloud offerings, we want to make sure that it looks as expected. Our notification style, for example, went from like hard, rigid edges with bold borders to the larger system. Thank you very much for linking that. You'll see more updates to this as we go. Some innocuous like your buttons and your notifications, some larger like your tabs and table styles.
I think that makes a ton of sense. You definitely don't ever want to change the full UI in one go. Do it, piece by piece, make it nice. Mike, question for you. Does Nomad have terminal access to or only web access?
It does have terminal access.
Oh wait, your audio is breaking up, so we're gonna pass this one.
Sorry, I'll change it.
We're gonna pass this one to Phil. Phil, if you could bring up your terminal again, then we can answer this with a live showcase, because that might be way easier.
Good. Okay. Back over to that.
And for the folks who just enjoyed the voice filter on Mike's voice, that is on purpose. It just sounds so much better. There we go.
Okay.
Let's see. Marcus, yes.
You should see. Oh, sorry. Let's take a look here. Terminal access. Yeah, Nomad has lots of different ways to get access to things. There is, of course, an HTTP API that you can tag into. There's a command line interface. I'm not going to be able to do as much justice as I'd like to this, but I certainly love using it. If you haven't taken a look at all the different things the CLI offers, it is much more robust than what the web UI does. The web UI is more kind of focused in its intent. But the CLI lets you do absolutely anything you would want to within Nomad, including direct access to the HTTP API by way of the Nomad operator command line interface. So yes, Marcos, there is definitely a terminal access to Nomad. I think that is probably the majority use case of how people interact with it. But as a person who kind of lives on the web and works on the web, I do prefer using the UI. I'm probably in the minority.
I think different use cases require different interfaces. I think that the CLI makes a ton of sense most of the time. There's times when you just need to be in a visual overview, and the UI, I think, makes it very clear if your allocations are failing or not. And of course, for the times when neither the UI nor the CLI work, there's a Terraform provider that you can use for some basic tasks. And as it goes with Terraform, combine your data sources, get some stuff out of Vault, get it directly into Nomad, definitely possible. So all the options available. And with that, on to the next question. Same one, so we'll go with yes. Of course, Marcos, it'd be interesting to hear what you're trying to do. Are you trying to build Nomad config? Are you trying to schedule workloads? Something else? Whatever works, let us know. Here we go. Got a link for you. You can also find the Terraform provider on the Terraform registry at registry.terraform.io. And then, final comment from Eduardo. It does. I can confirm that. All right, let's bring Mike back in the hopes that your audio is fixed.
Is this better?
Yes, much
Okay.
better.
Awesome. Had to change mics. Sounds good. Should I dive into my segment?
Yes, please.
Okay, cool. Hey, everybody. I'm going to talk about node pools. And let me share my screen. 1 second.
We were also getting very close to changing mics if yours didn't work out.
Is that a mic one?
It was.
Hold on. All right. I assume you're seeing my screen now?
We are seeing a beautiful inception of ourselves. Thank you for making all of it a little bit bigger. And
all right, cool. So I'm going to show off node pools today. So I brought up this example cluster, and it's running one job right now. And you'll see that there's this new value called node pool on the jobs and then also on the clients. And so node pool is a piece of metadata that you put on the config when you're setting up a node. So you would just write, node pool or pool equals some value. And that marks, you could only have one value on each node. And you could mark it as either the default, which is on by default, or other values, some string value. So I have an ingress node pool and a GPU node pool as outside of the defaults. So if we look at the topology view, let me just show those off really quick. So I have this one ingress node pool here running one job, and then I have the default, and then I have the GPU nodes. And this is just an easier way of separating what jobs get placed onto which nodes. And I want to just give a quick example of that. So right now, let's look at these two pools. One thing worth noting is that let's just take the default node pool. This is split between two different data centers. So there's AWS and GCP. So in a lot of ways, node pool acts like data center in that I have to opt into being on X, Y, or Z node pool. But it's actually a level of hierarchy beneath data center. So if you had a multi-data center cluster, you could have node pools that were, say, the GPU nodes on both AWS and GCP. And that makes it a lot easier to place things onto specific nodes. This is also kind of like data center, but it's also kind of like a node class or metadata that you may have seen before. So the advantage of having this node pool value is if I am running a job, Previously, if I wanted to say run a job and only send it to the default nodes, I'd have to do something like, oh, okay, I write this constraint and I say, and say I was tagging this with some metadata or node class, I'd have to say, hey, this job doesn't go to the GPU nodes, and it also doesn't go to the ingress nodes. And I'd have to add these constraints on for every single node that I wanted to have most jobs avoid. So if you have a set of nodes like GPU nodes that are more expensive, you only want to use them for one team specifically, then what you're able to do is just give people instead of having people write constraints to avoid these pools, they could just say node pool equals GPU or node pool equals ingress, et cetera, et cetera. And then the jobs will get put only on, or the tasks will get put only onto those nodes. So let me run this app server job right now, and I will show you how this works. So run app server. So I'm deploying this job right now, and we could see it's now up and running. I have not given any node pool value, but I have given this namespace value of apps. And now it's up and running. And if I look at my topology page, we can see that there's nothing being placed on the GPU nodes, but these allocations did get placed onto the default node pool. And so if I wanted to say, sorry, that's basically the default or the basis of how node pools work is that if I have something called GPU node or have something called ingress, they will automatically get opted out of placement. So I have to specifically specify, hey, this is going to the node pool of GPU or ingress to get anything placed on there. So that's the OSS, node pool feature. But for enterprise users, we also have what we're calling node pool governance, which adds a layer of security and complexity and governance on top of this. So say I were a member of this apps namespace. So I'm just like a standard app developer. And a Nomad admin does not want me placing anything onto the GPU nodes. So say I have multiple namespaces here. I have my machine learning team. The machine learning team can use the GPU nodes, but the app dev team can't. So that's the setup that I want. We have this in this feature when I create the apps namespace, I can create this. There's this new block called node pool config, and I can set a default node pool for anybody using the apps namespace. And so I set the default now to default, but I can also say that, hey, you're denied to use the GPU nodes if you're part of the apps namespace. So if I'm an app user, I come over here and I edit my job and I say, hey, let's go to node pool GPU. And I plan that, it'll say, oh, you're actually not allowed to do this because in your namespace config, this has been explicitly denied. If I were, a machine learning engineer, I might be using the ML namespace and my default actually might be GPU. So if I were deploying something as the machine learning engineer, I would just say, hey, my namespace is machine learning, and then things would automatically get sent to the GPU nodes. And this is really nice because the person who is writing the job spec doesn't have to know anything about the constraints or the cluster or how the metadata is set up on the nodes. They just have to know, hey, I'm in this specific namespace. They send their job in and their job gets put on the right place. So let's show off what that looks like if I'm just a machine learning engineer and I want to place nodes on the right machines. So I'm going to do a Nomad run ML workload. I think I have this all in a single command. 1 second. Nomad run. Here, I'll just run multiple of these. 1 second. Oh, sorry. What did I do wrong here? Ah, my bad. All right, so I now just ran multiple of these jobs to the ML namespace. These are all running. And now we could check out where they got placed. So I didn't have to specify anything about the constraints as the end user. I didn't know any of that. All I knew is that I was on the ML team. And we can see that in the default node pool, I still have my original app server job. And all of my jobs have now been put into the GPU namespace. And they've all clustered around here. And so that's kind of something interesting, is why have they all clustered on these two nodes? And so that's something, again, that for our enterprise users, we have this additional configuration option, which when you are setting up your node pool, and this is optional, you don't have to do this, but you can specify scheduler configuration for each node pool. So in my global default is to, my global default algorithm is to spread all my allocations out. And so if we look at what happened when I deployed to the default node pool, it spread all the allocations over these 4 nodes. But on the GPU nodes, it actually clustered things all together in here because I have this bin pack algorithm. And so this allows different teams to have different scheduling algorithms and also memory over subscription values for each of their node pools. And so if I were using this, again, for this ML workload, I could really say, hey, I don't want to spend a lot of money on cloud GPU nodes. That's really expensive. I'm going to make those pack as densely as possible with the bin pack algorithm. But let's say my default node pool, I don't really care about cost as much, or maybe this is like an on-prem setup where I've already paid for these nodes. I could then use the spread algorithm here. So you can mix and match these scheduling algorithms across your whole cluster. And so you're not, forced to say, hey, I can only use bin pack or only use spread by default across my cluster. And yeah, so that's the basis of node pools. Is at the OSS value, you can just specify your namespace and automatically get placed on the default. Or if you need to opt into nodes, you can specify node pool equals GPU or whatnot, or ingress or whatever value you've set. And then at the enterprise level, you can tie these namespaces to default node pools. You can restrict node pools, and then you can also set different scheduler config for each node pool. And yeah, I'll stop sharing now and then take any questions.
Definitely taking some questions here. So first of all, great demo. Shantanu has thoughts on the extension changing.
Yeah, so we did that because different code editors have .hcl built in, and they don't have .nomad built in as often. And then, oh, Charlie's got it. So eventually, if we also wanted to have Nomad specific HCL, you could have a .nomad.hcl highlighter that exists. But if not, then you have the HCL that exists already for Terraform or whatnot. So if some IDE hasn't implemented Nomad specific HCL in the future, it could still just pick up the HCL highlighting.
As someone who writes in multiple HCL dialects, I guess, it is very nice not to constantly have to switch, languages in my head. I'm a fan of this highlight, looking the same in Packer and Terraform in all of them. Let's see, what else do we have in terms of questions? Macy has an interesting question. How to assign a runner to a specified pool?
I'm curious what runner means here.
Macy, if you can clarify. If not, do we go with...
So I can, maybe like a client, like a worker or client job. So basically, it's just a value at the config. So let me pull up, I'll share my screen really quick. Again, 1 second. Oop, Inception, my bad.
That was my bad.
What did I call this? So there's this, you're going to see some poor syntax highlighting here because this is actually a Nomad job to create Nomad clients. But basically, we just have this Nomad or node pool value in the client block. And so you would just say node pool equals, in this case, it's interpolating this S, but it's something like GPU or ingress or ingress, et cetera. And by default, if you don't specify this, it will just be the default node pool. And so that's all you really have to do. You just have to specify this. And if you want to create extra config, like that scheduler config, then at that point, you can create this node pool file and send it to Nomad and say, hey, this is the description of the node pool or whatnot. But by default, all you have to do is set something up in your client config like this. So that's that. Hopefully that answers.
I think so. And if not, hit us up in the comments. Then, of course, I was going to save this one for about 20 minutes from now, but what's coming with Nomad Pack? We hinted at it in the release notes.
Yeah, so check out the release blog for more information. We are hard at work on Nomad Pack 0.1 and a lot of quality of life changes there, like rendering files that aren't jobs alongside jobs, having optional jobs that may or may not get deployed as part of a pack. Then the big one is job dependencies and vendoring. And so that was something that we shipped, with the tech preview. But it was frankly underbaked, and we did a lot of work to bring that up to speed. So it should be a lot easier to have like versioned pack dependencies, or hey, I have a template helper that defines how I run stateful services across all of my jobs. How do I reuse that and use Semver across all of my packs? That should get a lot better with Nomad Pack 0.1. So that is something we are, weeks away from shipping. And so that'll come out soon. There will be breaking changes there because of how we deal with kind of our dependencies and passing in variables. So just FYI, that's coming soon, but it should be a big improvement. Again, lots of quality of life changes, dependencies working a lot better, and then some bug fixes as well. So yeah,
so
and
I think
will there be an office hours being the question? I hope so.
100% up for that. I think it's worth highlighting. It's a nice unit of delivering work and making sure your work can easily be shared with other people, because realistically, you usually end up having more than just a single job spec file. You need documentation, you need everything else that goes with it. So yes, and Eduardo and everyone else who's using Nomad Pack, please give us feedback. Use a tech preview. Let us know what breaks. Let us know how the new things sound to you. Let us know which things we might be missing, because it helps us shape the roadmap. That's the word I was looking for. And for that, you can actually schedule. Mike, can we still schedule roadmap chats with you?
You can.
Awesome. Then we'll get a link for that up in the chat notes. Chat. Today, English has been very hard. Probably rebooting the system there. Jackie, I just want to give you a quick shout out here. Yes, you definitely dropped by the best community office hours. Node pools, pack, so much good stuff. You missed out on the beautiful UI improvements, but the good thing is this will be on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it back. And then for you, Eduardo, pack nightlies are back. Dodgy, yes, because they are nightly. Some of them work, some of them don't, but keep trying them. Feedback is important. Feedback helps us shape better products. And there we go. Thank you for getting that link in there. This is very nice. So while we wait for some more community questions, we had one on GitOps operators, and Simon, I think it was Simon that asked. We shared a link for that also in the chat notes. Of course, as with everything, why are you looking to do that? Not in a judgy way, but we're curious. Why Why is it that you're trying to do GitOps for your jobs? What kind of jobs? Is it all containerized workloads? Is it something else? It's always interesting to hear. I think.
Hey, can I shamelessly plug a GitOps thing that I did while we're talking about it?
100%.
Okay, cool. So I wrote a GitHub action. 1 second, let me bring it up. But basically, it allows you to auth into Nomad using GitHub JWT identity tokens. And I want to talk about this because the JWT auth stuff in Nomad, I think, is potentially under marketed by us. So I figured I'd use this opportunity. But basically, when you do log into Nomad, so SSO came out in 1.5. So check that out if you haven't. But as part of SSO, we also shipped JWT auth. So rather than signing in via Okta or whatever, you can present a signed JWT, or it's technically pronounced JOT, but that's confusing to everybody. I'll call it JOT. You can pass the JOT to Nomad and point it, and you can configure Nomad to point to some public keys that said, hey, this person signed this JOT. I trust it. I'm going to give it permissions to do stuff, and Nomad returns a token. What's cool is that some third parties like GitHub issue JWTs and have public keys that are up. And they will embed those JWTs in GitHub Actions. So I'm going to go check out this. I will link to this GitHub action. But basically, it allows you to run a GitHub action that uses the GitHub JWT to get a short-lived Nomad token. And then you could pass that into future GitHub actions that could do something like, hey, I'm going to read this directory and deploy all of these packs, or I'm going to read all this directory and deploy all of these jobs on every merge or whatnot. So I'll link to that in the show notes, but I just want to get extra eyes on this because it's a really cool use case for using the Nomad JWT auth.
It is 100% a really cool use case. I saw the demo for it, and I think the best part is whenever you can make security seamless while still being secure, especially with JOT, I think you pin it to not just a repository, but also the specific branch. It's beautiful because you know that there's not going to be any leaking on that side. And combine that with what Phil showed us earlier, Nomad variables that are really scoped down to the smallest possible element that you can scope them down to. Security doesn't become free, but it becomes a lot easier to achieve. And I think that's a good outcome any day of the week. Eduardo has an interesting question. Will there be native support for Podman like there is for Docker?
So native, I'm not sure. I will say Podman has gotten a really significant upgrade this release cycle as well. So I think it's the 0.4 release. So some changes that we made, the big one is Consul Connect actually working with Podman out of the box. So if you're running a Podman job and you have the Connect sidecar, it used to be that would run Docker to run Consul Connect. And that was like, okay, why am I using Podman? I have to run the Docker daemon anyway. No one wants to do that. So now we'll automatically recognize, hey, you're running Podman. I'm going to launch the Connect sidecar using Podman. There's that and some other changes. I check out the blog post on that. We don't have it as native right now. You still have to do the dance to set up the dependency correctly. That's something we're thinking about. How can we make that easier with something like automatic downloads of drivers, or like working on the packaging better, but we haven't done that yet. So might be curious if just like, apt getting and having Nomad point to the right directory where, the apt-get sticks it would be enough, or if you'd really want like true native support. But that's something we're debating internally.
Definitely worth trying out. The other day I tried out OrbStack, which works as a Docker replacement seamlessly, very beautiful, a lot faster. And give it a try and see what breaks. Your jobs are not our jobs. Your job files are not our jobs. you might incur, changes or breaking changes that we don't see. So definitely let us know there. And then I think for the current questions, that's definitely it. Phil, what's next for the UI?
We have a lot on the go. One of the things that I'm pretty excited about is getting ACL roles in there. I think for a long time, the UI has been less than useful, let's say, for people that have role-based access. We're making that just as good, if not better, than doing policy-based access. So you'll see a lot of changes coming with that, including if you're a manager operator, being able to modify and add tokens to ACL roles. Pretty helpful little feature via the UI. So look for that in the near future. And everything else coming up for the UI is under very tight wraps. I am not allowed to talk about it for many fears.
For many reasons. Good features always take time, but as you can tell from the 1.6 release, this is the hottest Nomad UI that we've ever seen. So give it the time it needs. I think the mantra you mentioned earlier, don't try to trouble the end user with information that's not relevant. That is a beautiful guiding principle. Do you want to dive into that a little bit, how we choose what to show and what not to show?
Yeah, certainly. So I want to really quickly make sure that this isn't something that comes off like it's been my decision. We have a really incredible team behind this, and the foremost driver, her name is Julie, a designer on this team, has been really, really great about pushing these ideas forward. So we've been sitting down and saying, well, what do our jobs look like? What's currently painful about the UI? What have we seen comments about on GitHub? Please continue adding GitHub issues, right? And we've said things like, well, it's not that big a deal that I had something fail and get replaced. I guess that there's somebody out there that for whom it's a huge deal that an allocation failed and replaced, because an allocation failing might mean some financial catastrophe for somebody somewhere. But we found that the vast majority of cases aren't like that. We've given you an out if that is you as an operator. We think that you probably don't exist, but if you do, you still have access to that historical view. But for the vast majority of users, they just want to know, do I have the thing that I asked for? Almost everything else in the Nomad UI works that way, right? If you say, tell me about my nodes, it's going to show you your nodes. It's not going to show you what your nodes used to be like, or before you took a data center offline, what those were like. Your metadata on your nodes and on your jobs is always up to date. It's not going to show you a historical track record of all those things. You could get it via your logging service or something else. But allocations for a job and job summaries in general were the exception. We showed you a long tail of history of that when we know that most people have different ways of viewing that if they wanted to. If they want to go and take a look through their logs and see how allocations did over the weekend on Monday morning, that's great. There are other tools that do that. But the real thing that you want to know when you come to work on Monday is are the 120 allocations that I wanted up? Are they running? Are they healthy? Of the ones that restarted, did they get restarted and replaced? And that's basically it. We have been a little bit more selective about a couple other things. What we show you in that quite long list of things that we'll show you as task events during deployment. We've pared that list down a good amount. There are lots of things that can happen when a task runs. We show you the important ones that come up there. Similarly, we've tried to abstract away certain statuses. It was part of the UI demo, but not a big part of it. There's basically a little badge that'll show up right above the running job that says if the job is healthy, or if the job is degraded, or if the job, for example, is recovering. Recovering is kind of a new piece of nomenclature that we use here, but it means exactly what you think it is. Some of your allocations have failed. They are currently being replaced, and we are currently doing something like health checking them or bringing them online. In that case, we wouldn't say that your job has failed. We would say that it's on its way to being recovered. They're all small little things that hopefully clue users into being able to get on with their days. The best version of the Nomad UI is the one you look at, say, looks good, and you continue on with all the other stuff you had to do that day.
I like that Monday morning example because, depending on what you see in the UI, you decide if you need 1 or 2 shots of espresso. Mike, any thoughts on something we can reveal?
Yeah. Have you ever thought to yourself, I want to think more about Consul and Vault tokens? Probably not. So Nomad 1.7, part of my goal is to, or our goal as a team is to have you think as little as possible about Vault tokens and Consul tokens. You do a one-time setup, and then hopefully you should have to manage those relationships less and have kind of more solid integrations, easier integrations there. So that's what we're working on for kind of the core of 1.7. And I haven't updated it yet, but we have a public roadmap. I think there will be some more info coming there as far as what's coming on 1.7. It's linked to on our main GitHub repo in the README. So check that out. There's some more information on the Consul and Vault refreshes that we're hard at work on for 1.7.
A lot of exciting new features this year. 1.5 dynamic node metadata, and of course, JOT support. 1.6 with a beautiful UI, node pools. 1.7 is roadmap is looking delicious. So this is an exciting year. We want to talk about use cases in the future that mirror Simon's deploying on the edge. Let's talk about what edge means to you. Find us on Twitter, x.com, whatever you want to call it these days, or anywhere else, Mastodon. I want to hear what you're trying to deploy, what kind of workload, what's your hardware looking like, what does your connectivity look like? Are the things that we introduced in, was it 1.4? It was June last year-ish. 1.3 maybe? It's been a while. Are the timeout settings, are they helping? If not, what's not helping? I'm extremely interested in this specific use case. And of course, Mike, anything to add to that?
No, nothing specific. We're seeing more and more people using Nomad for edge, and it's kind of buzzwordy. It can mean a lot of things, but we see Nomad in a lot of places. It like sometimes it just means small point of presence data center and a single cluster that has a lot of those little data centers as part of it. Sometimes that means legit as edge IoT devices running Nomad. We're seeing more of that. Again, we're always curious about where we're kind of missing functionality. We added some stuff in, I think it was 1.3 about losing connection and reconnecting. And then we also, I just want to give a shout out to Tim, who wrote something to get rid of the logmon processes that were taking up some memory. So this was something that edge users often they were trying to run a bunch of tasks with as little memory as possible, and they had their own log aggregator, and they didn't need logmon running. And so that was a change that we recently added to try to make the Nomad memory footprint as small as possible on the clients to support things like these use cases. So let us know if you have some edge use case and Nomad needs some tweak to work better for it.
Definitely interested in the underlying hardware. If you can get your hands on it, Raspberry Pi 02W can run Nomad, which is, to me, mind-blowing. How you can run this kind of software on, well, if you can get it like $10, $12 hardware, it's beautiful. Shantanu and others, apologies for the audio troubles we had earlier. On our side, everything is showing up as good, but we'll do some post-processing and hopefully clear that up for you. Of course, before we part, a couple shout-outs to things that you should be checking out. We talked about the UI results today. Check out the office hours from March, also available on YouTube, where we talked about what we were planning on doing with the UI and our path towards it. As an engineer, even if you're not in the habit of figuring out how to make information more user-friendly and more user-accessible, it's still a super good learning. We had Tim here, I think last time, talking about all the things that we're making better in terms of memory footprint and just making the overall experience of operating Nomad nicer. And then if you're new to Nomad, I saw a couple of comments. Check out the HashiCorp developer zone at developer.hashicorp.com/nomad. Tons of tutorials. Beautiful. Thank you for the lower banner there. Tons of tutorials, guides about how to get started with Nomad, how to run different workloads, what to think about, and a lot of other documentation. And then I think very important, if you have no travel plans yet, our fall conference is coming up, HashiConf in San Francisco and online if you can travel, October 10, 11, 12. So head on over to hashiconf.com, register either for an in-person ticket, meet some of us there, enjoy some awesome Nomad talks. I've seen a preview of one. It's going to be interesting. Epic is going to talk about cooking with Nomad, and we'll leave the rest for the actual event. And of course, if you don't feel like traveling, enjoy the virtual version. Mike, Phil, any closing words?
Just want to say thanks for putting this on. It was great to interact with the whole community and see all your wonderful questions. So keep them coming.
I think before we head over, switch over to you, Mike, I think one final request from Shantanu, can we make all elements click and copy pastable?
Yes, absolutely. It'll be done ASAP, tomorrow, in fact.
I can't tell if Phil's joking because multiple times questions have come up like this in a community office hours, and then it's literally like 48 hours and Phil has shipped a PR for it. So
my source is telling me that you're not working on this tomorrow, so I love that you're loading somebody else up with this. Either way, it's a great feature to have. Mike, any thoughts from you?
I mean, just as always, like, thank you. Please continue to engage. There was that link to talk roadmap. If you want to talk like high level, hey, I wish Nomad would go in this direction, or if this one feature were in Nomad, it would, make it that much more useful. I love talking to our users about this in one-on-one or async. Please feel free to reach out to me or whomever. And thanks for using Nomad.
Yeah. Thank you both for being here. I'm excited about the next one where we get to talk about Nomad Pack, hopefully show off some packs, show off some new integrations that we have that are worth highlighting on its own because of how cool they are. And with that, everyone, thank you for your questions. You've been an awesome audience. We'll see you next time. And with that, we're out of here.